because I have all these things going through my head. How are we going to run the big event this weekend? Am I going to be able to get through the sales presentation? What if this doesn't work? What if that doesn't work? And I'm driving like 65 miles an hour and I'm like, I am like having a blackout episode, worried I was going to have a heart attack. I had to like pull over on the mass bike because I was literally blacking out.
Welcome to the Big W. Who we got on today, Maddie?
We are so pumped to have Keith Sullivan, better known as Sully, co-founder of Medusa Brewing out of Hudson, Massachusetts. Now, Medusa Brewing was the winner of the gold medal award at the World Beer Cup in 2016. And this is one of the most prestigious awards internationally for brewers. The crazy thing is they were only 3 years old at the time. Sully has been a salesman. He's been a musician. He is now a craft brewery owner. But throughout his journey, his creativity and willingness to take risks has led him down a path of success.
You and I know Sully really well. You and I have been to Medusa a bunch of times. I mean, just to sample the product. We have to know what we're talking about, right?
In thimbles or a little tiny shot glass, just a sample.
Yeah, we've actually brought the whole team there too, for like a fun night out. And it's got a cool vibe inside, right? The story about them winning gold at the World Beer Cup is just such an interesting story. Also, he talked a lot about why spending time in the now is super important to him. And you and I were nodding our head the whole time. And the last thing, man, he talked about a story about how a stress-induced blackout while driving on the Mass Pike was a pivotal moment in his journey. And you and I were like pins and needles.
And for those of you that don't know the Mass Pike, it's not like a back end alley that you go about 3 miles per hour. You're going about 80 cruising.
Welcome to the Big W. And we have our guest today, Sully. Joining us today, Sully. We very much value your time. You are going to offer a very different perspective, we feel like, than a lot of other businesses we talk to, in that you are in the craft brewery industry, which has taken off the last couple of years. And we really want to take people back into how you got in this industry, because it's not like you grew up as a brewer as a young kid. This is a big change for you. So to start off, really want to kind of hear about what you were doing before this journey with Medusa Brewing and what life looked like day to day.
Before the whole Medusa thing took my life over, I was working in various different technology companies. The last one selling a pretty complicated security product to lots of large businesses around the globe. So I got a lot of experience traveling and understanding how a product has to work to market it properly and how it appeals. And I think a lot of that helped. I've also been in bands for a lot of my adult life, or I was up until Medusa. And, I always loved the creation process of a song and, the I hate to sound like a business person, but like the product of a band, and how that image portrays through the music and through the merch and the name and, all that. We played a lot of cool concerts, including opening for Huey Lewis, traveling out to Omaha to do that, and playing some big shows at Hard Rock Cafe in Boston. And I would write the bass lines basically for the songs. I did write some of my own songs with lyrics, but we're not going to demo any of those on this podcast. So, but I did love like that creative process, and it's always been something that's been a part of me. I had some just varied experiences that kind of all came together to Medusa, I want to say.
The creative piece makes sense, and that kind of, like we can easily see how that would have an influence on, the success that Medusa's had is, it's a very creative industry. It's, you're creating something from scratch. You're producing it, you're tweaking it, you're editing it, you're making sure that people give good feedback, you make changes, and then you have to market it. So it's very similar to a band in that sense.
Yeah, it is. And we joke, like a lot of the crew that works for me are big music fans, and around the industry, music's a big part of the brewing scene. And there's a lot of musicians, come to find out, that are in this group. And I've always said that running the brewery and having the customers they're almost like fans, and being a brewer is almost like being, I don't want to say a rock star. There are some rock star brewers out there, that everybody knows who they are. But it's kind of like being in a band. We all play around in the same circuit, have similar fans. You know, it's fun.
Do you think that the creative process that you've been using, like back then, like kind of helped you be a bigger risk taker? Do you think that those are correlated at all, that you allowed your creativity to churn and that allowed you to kind of pivot off? Do you think those are correlated at all?
I do, absolutely. When you're in a band, or whether you're an artist or someone who's creating original content, whether it's beer, a dish at a restaurant, maybe a new insurance package, who knows? But you can only think so far in terms of how that product is going to be successful. I mean, sometimes things are out of the gate successful and it completely surprises you. That's happened to me more often than creating something that I think is going to be successful and then watching it plummet. You know, so like writing a song, like this is the best song, and you play it and everyone's like kind of like, you know, next. Or we come up with a great beer recipe that we think, and it takes 3 months to sell that beer. Whereas we screw a beer up and augment it with some, you know, different hops or something to try to revive it and bring it back, and it winds up being, you know, one of the coolest things we've made. So yeah. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. I don't know what you could call that, but you know, sometimes the best things are created through just by chance, and the more you do it, the less time you spend weighing the risk. You just put it out there and see what happens, and be humble about it and willing to accept criticism.
Yeah, but you have to put it out there.
You have to put it out there. Yeah,
that's what so many entrepreneurs in general are good at. That's why entrepreneurship is a calling for a few, and maybe not for everyone, is that they're willing to put it out there and fail and look silly, you know, to the general public or to their consumer base. And you have to have a lot of self-worth and confidence in yourself to be a musician, because probably more than anything, you get criticized more than people clap. So what happens in your life that causes you to want to run towards breweries?
I had met one of my business partners, Keith Antul, at a job prior to the last one I was doing. It was still technology, security stuff, but he and I traveled a lot, and as part of the travel process, we always planned out, you know, where to go for beer, where to go to eat. Having a company credit card, that was kind of the thing to do when the work was done. We went and checked things out, and I'd always been drawn to good beer. I grew up in a family that cooked, so I've always been comfortable being adventurous with food and always trying to find something, you know, delicious or obscure. So I developed this deeper passion for beer, hanging out with Keith, and come to find out he was sort of I don't hate saying this about him, but it's true. He's a celebrated kind of home brewer in the Worcester beer scene. Being tapped into some of the restaurants there, people knew of him. And he gave me a huge education on craft beer, the brewing process, and even got me into brewing myself in those few years that I was at that company. And then we parted ways, and I worked at the last one, and I was starting a family up. We had bought the house, and I was traveling quite a bit. I mean, at least a couple weeks a month, and it was probably going to increase to something even more, with a position that was kind of aligning with me. We had already started the project of Medusa. We had met another business partner who wanted to do it. And we figured if I could market it and Keith could make the beer, the other one could do the financials, you know, pay the bills, do the accounting. So long story short, working from home, we got it open. It was painstaking and horrible. It was a very difficult time, but it was 15 months of, you know, working one job and building Medusa every night, every weekend, because we built a lot of it ourselves. At one point, I don't know when the transition happened, but I was having lots of issues with myself, like anxiety, unable to focus. I was still doing really well at my other job, but I could really tell it was affecting me. And I was going to start turning downward on one of them. And I just kind of weighed the risks. I'm like, what do I have skin in the game with this great career I have working in the security field? Or, you know, I just put 15 months of my life into building this brewery. Is it a hobby that I do on the side? And so we, you know, Keith took the jump first and went full time. And then it was one of those things, risk. It was too much to analyze at once. So my wife and I talked it through a little bit, and we decided I could always go back to work. And that's when we took the jump, and I'm glad we did, because it allowed me to focus a lot more on the brewery itself, what its purpose is, how it acts within the community that supports it, and it's allowed Medusa to become more than just a manufacturer. You know, a lot of breweries, tap rooms, they make beer. That's great. They have a great, cool Instagram account, but are they actually doing anything in the community? I'm not speaking about anyone in particular, but I just think you have to do things to stand out these days. And if I hadn't taken that jump, I don't know if Medusa would be doing that, because that's a lot of what I do.
That 15-month journey that you're talking about there, you added so much extra stress to your life that you really didn't need to. And it obviously worked. But in the beginning, in that first month or 2 or 3, where you're chatting with Keith, like really trying to develop what was, the infancy of Medusa, it doesn't sound like this was planned to be your full-time job and a takeover. It seems like this was more like a passion project. Is that kind of how it felt in the early days, where you're just dreaming about some stuff? Or was this like, were you thinking you were going to have 2 businesses, that you were going to be a W-2 and Medusa and whatever that was going forward? What was the thought process behind that?
Well, the thought process was that they would run parallel for a while. And I don't know why I thought this, but I had this notion that I would be able to comfortably just walk myself into Medusa and close the door on my career behind me. And that doing the 2 of them side by side would be no problem at all. You always think, I'll have a bar manager that'll take care of everything, and, nothing will ever break, and employees aren't that difficult. You just got to give them a schedule. And if they don't listen, try to inspire them and talk. It's not how it works at all, man. And, I think we opened in March, and I remember August, we had grown from like 6 employees to 12. We're open 6 out of 7 days a week. Could not keep up with demand. I had my wife helping me with the schedule. We were still finishing up the brewery itself, even though we were open, like finishing things that we had, wanted to finish but couldn't because we had to get revenue running. It was like the peak of anxiety in my life. It was just like physically, it was breaking me down. I remember I was on my way to this huge presentation that I had to run at this big biotech company in Cambridge. I had to like pull over on the Mass Pike because I was literally blacking out. I was like, I'm driving like 65 miles an hour, and I'm like, I am like having a blackout episode. I had to pull over, and I was like worried I was going to have a heart attack. It was so bad because I had all these things going through my head. Like, how are we going to run the big event this weekend? Am I going to be able to get through the sales presentation? What if this doesn't work? What if that doesn't work? And that's kind of when I realized my own health is more important than, the dual income, which was awesome.
Well, I think what you said, we both nodded our head because we can relate. And a lot of people who get into business for themselves earlier in life, if you can kind of say to yourself, hey, I can always go back to work. I can always find a sales job. I can always go, do what I was doing as a fallback. It kind of empowers you and gives you that permission to go out on your own and do your own thing. Seems like you created demand immediately. Like there was tons of demand right away. That's a good problem, but it was an even bigger problem for you because you were managing two worlds and then having a family as well, which is nutty. What created in those early days? What was the catalyst that created that type of demand?
A lot of it was the planning that we put into the business plan. We didn't exactly know how this would go, but we, when I talk about how I didn't know when I'd transition and the stress of that, but at the same time, when I look back, I have to give ourselves credit on how well we planned this. And I think that has a lot to do with the initial success being that in the height of the craft beer boom. I mean, this was right, hang 10 on that wave coming in. We plopped a exciting full bar tap room. It was actually the first or second true tap room in Massachusetts. So we had that, to help us. Now everybody has one, but it was plopped right on Main Street in a on fire business community that had 2 new restaurants, an existing craft beer scene, and no other craft beer for at least 15 to 20 miles, right at the epicenter of 290, 495 Mass Pike. And the brand Medusa is recognizable, catchy, and then to open up with beer that was a little bit different than the status quo really attracted a lot of curious people, I think. So we just kind of lined up the timing, the delivery, the opening, and then the fact that the opening was actually delayed, not by our fault, but we ran out of money a bunch of times, and ran into construction and permitting issues, and it just kept building the hype automatically.
It's super duper interesting that you said it in that order. So I feel like a lot of businesses we talk to, they default back to the product. The product is just that much better. And I'll tell you, you know what, Zach and Matt, like we spent so much more time than anybody else on our beer. And that may be true, but it's still your taste. It's still your preference. It's still what you want to put out to the world. I think when you have the kind of success that you had in the beginning, it is for a myriad of factors. It has to be. And I love that you talked about the market as well as the location of your business, because that's a huge factor. It was incredibly difficult to get to. If you put yourself way out in East Bumblefuck and you were just in the middle of absolutely nowhere on a dirt road, but you had the best beer in the world, it's hard.
There's a couple of anomalies out there that establish themselves as the creators of that beer, no one else. That was done. And I think a lot of times now breweries think they can do that again. You can't do it again. It's like walking in and being like, hey, we're starting a band. We're going to be the next Led Zeppelin. It's not going to happen again. It's all been done. It's all been done.
The mystique is gone.
The mystique's gone. So you'd have to literally create a new style of beer. You're the grandfathers of it. Do it better than anyone else. And it takes the country. It's not going to happen. It's not just about the beer anymore. It's about the experience. Just think about products in general, whether they're physical or they're a digital service or something. Everything is so high bar now, including customer service. Like if I have a problem with my Weber grill, I call them up and 10 seconds later, a new part's on its way for free. Amazon, no questions asked. Like it's all about the experience now. No matter what you're making, what you're selling, you got to be that much better than your neighbor or the generation before you.
That's so well said, and we talk about it a lot about the power of community and how a lot of people seek out community now more than ever because they've lost community in other parts of their life, and so a tap room in the middle of a busy area is a great central place to go to have experiences and share memories and have conversations and have trivia night like you guys have put on before.
Like going to church.
Exactly, it is. You guys entered into World Beer Cup.
Yeah.
And tell us what that experience was like and kind of the culmination of that, if you don't mind.
Sure. It was, Keith, coming from his homebrew background, really cut his teeth on homebrewing beer and not just drinking it himself at home and keeping it to himself or his close-knit friends and neighbors, but he would submit almost everything to competitions. So he really became a brewer who was making beer to compete, doing homebrew competitions, and won a lot of medals for some of his beers, stuff that we still do today. And so opening and becoming professional, I use that word lightly, but professional brewers, Keith wanted to keep that going. So we would strategically look at what the styles were that you could apply to enter a beer, and what we were doing that matched up with those styles, and then which ones we thought we were doing really well, and then which ones we thought were a crapshoot, but it'd be awesome if we won, like Lasercat IPA. We always submit for that, but it's one of probably 200 entries now. And this World Beer Cup is the biggest one. It's like the Olympics of beer. You're competing all around the world. If you're in the lager category, you're not only competing against Night Shift and Jack Savvy and all the California breweries and everybody else, but you've got Molson in there, Miller Coors, Budweiser, everybody. It's the big one. And we had not done one before because we opened in 2015 and World Beer Cup was in 2016. We entered 4 beers, I believe. 3 had not won. And then they got to the Bohemian style Pilsner category, which includes Czech Pilsner. It's similar to a German Pilsner, just the hops are tweaked just ever so slightly that it can be its own category. It's just a little bit hoppier than what you'd see for a German Pils. And we're sitting at a table with 2 of Massachusetts' biggest beer legends. And it wasn't planned that way. We just happened to be sitting next to Will Meyer of Cambridge Brewing. Cambridge Brewing is one of the oldest brew pubs in the country, and certainly the first, I believe, in Massachusetts. And he's won many, 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 many awards. And sitting across from him and next to us was Todd Mott, who's one of the first head brewers at Harpoon. He's the creator of Harpoon IPA. He's brewed for a ton of different breweries. He has his own now in Maine, but he's just one of those legends. And so they go through the bronze medal, the silver medal for Bohemian Pills, and then they say, and the gold medal goes to Duchovny, Medusa Brewing Company, Hudson, Mass. And we're like, then it took a second to hit us. It was just unbelievable because we're in a room full of thousands of people at this big fancy dinner, sitting next to two Massachusetts beer legends. We got to get up and go get our award, and it was really cool.
Did you say, like, when you were walking up, did you turn to them and say, "Can I get you anything while I'm up"?
Oh, I totally would have. They were great about it, and I think they were kind of like, wow, like this new generation of brewers can do it too. I'm not speaking for them, but it was cool.
Well, the fact that you even think that they thought that and that they gave the impression that they were happy for you just shows that you're in an industry that supports others, and that's important because there are, 7 million people in Massachusetts, and that's just Massachusetts. That's a lot of beers that can go around. Harpoon is obviously inner Boston. Cambridge is obviously a part of Boston as well. Medusa is nowhere near those places. Not to say you don't want people in greater Boston drinking your beer. That's not what I'm saying at all, but it's a totally different area. It's a completely different area. Now, that World Beer Cup, that story you talked about, clearly put you on the map. At that point, did brand spike? Did sales spike? Or did you use that to advertise and help it spike? Talk to us about after the World Beer Cup.
Yeah, I think afterwards, and it was what was really significant to build on what you were saying a second ago, was that not only did we win a big award, but Night Shift Brewing that year won silver for American IPA, which was again, it's one of those impossible categories because everybody submits for that, and Santilli won a huge award. So Massachusetts walked away with 3 medals, and we usually walk away with 1 or nothing. You know, most of these medals are going to California, Colorado, the states that have that brewery per capita that's just crazy. So it was a really cool part of the night to be like celebrating with Night Shift. But after the dust kind of settled, we came back, and there was a huge change in like just our local regulars. Like it really kind of allowed us to take pause and realize how important our base customer was, because they came in, where's that beer? We need to have that beer. You got to brew that beer again. That is so awesome. And we hung the gold leaf medal thing that they gave us right above the bar. And that certainly gave us validation for that beer and that we need to brew it more often, which we do. It kind of has this little legend, not legend, but people say, oh, Duchovny, that's like the gold beer. You guys got to keep brewing that. And people, it has its own little fan base. We never went so far as to put the medal winning seal on the side of the can. We thought about doing it, but we never did that. One thing that was not expected that definitely gives me a little laugh is that, Pilsner is a very clean tasting beer that pretty much most people are going to enjoy. Even if you're not a craft beer drinker, you'll drink a Pilsner and be like, oh, wow, that's actually a really flavorful beer. And it's not anything that's going to cause someone to be, oh, you know what I mean? It's just, it's easy drinking. And so a lot of times with this wave of drinkers looking for the most intense, most exciting, most crazy, obscure beers, there's an app out there that you can use to rate them. It's called Untapped. And we noticed that after that beer won the medal, the ratings for it increased significantly. Even though the recipe didn't change, we just added the 2016 World Beer Cup gold medal winner to the description. And I don't know if people are reading that or if it was one of those weird social things where people are like, oh, it won a gold medal, it must be better than 3.
Yeah.
3 out of 5 stars, because even though I don't like that style, I don't know, it was kind of funny to me. It's held that.
I'd give it a 3, but I don't know. It won some award. I might as well do it a 4.
We haven't made any major changes to our business, and we're certainly going to. We were forced to this spring, but I plan on Medusa being around for a long time, and I'm in the process of trying to figure out what the new Medusa looks like. And those conversations I've had with these people have keep coming up in my head. And being around successful people can sometimes help you look past the minutia, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is, but some of the folks I've just been meeting with and working with are so, they're on the moon at this point, even in this COVID thing. Like before that, like in my eyes, they've made it to the moon already. And I'm still building the test launch, but just being around people like that and seeing not their success financially, but their success just being able to open and run multiple businesses and sell businesses, but also have almost unlimited freedom in their own life to do the things that they want to do while raising a family has just been, I would never have thought it would be possible.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons we're doing this podcast, is to create a little bit of our own masterclass of just chatting with other successful people and learning from successful people. Because, Matt and I relate a lot of things to golf and fitness just because it's like things we enjoy. And I got to tell you, when you play with a bad golfer, you do things that you don't typically do. When you play with a better golfer than you kind of level up. And a lot of times we forget that in business, is sometimes we have to have difficult and challenging conversations and listen a lot more than we talk with people who have already kind of done their own successful journey and kind of learn from it. And on that kind of chord, you've obviously had a really big change in the last couple of years of what you're trying to do and the frustrations you're going through. What advice would you give to yourself as a business owner in 2018? If you could go back into the Sully of 2018 and just kind of knock them on the head and give one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
Balancing myself out more towards the now. I don't know how to explain that, but all through 2017 and 2018, I lived through what I wanted to do in that whole, where do I want to be in 3 to 5 years thing. And I spent so much time and so much energy planning and working on that I started letting things that were important in the now moment slip. Personally, professionally, nothing terrible, but just little things that I pay for now. Whether it was spending more time with a team member who was struggling to do a entry-level job, just a little bit of time each week spending with that person probably would have resulted in, a much better employment record with them. No one specifically, but just little situations like that, or, maybe planning a little bit more taproom expansion and wholesale negotiating earlier than we did to get our product out there sooner, more time on marketing and building a stronger core than planning for that, that big project that we're still not even kicked off on. It's an important lesson that I've taken away, is that just in the last year, this year especially, I've spent so much more time thinking about what's going on currently. You can't get to that 3 to 5 year goal if you don't spend any time in the now moment, because it's all you've got. There is no high-speed spaceship that's going to jump you to year 5. You got to live through the whole 1, 2, and 3 to get there.
Entrepreneurs and business owners, I think, can all relate to that to a certain degree. I mean, I know myself, I've been challenged with that for many years. It's always like, sitting in the moment, being grateful for what you have right this second, and focusing on things that matter right now, while also spending enough time vision planning and strategizing on how we're going to create a future that's different than current. And that balance is challenging, and for everybody.
Well, it's when you're a small business, you don't have a team of, incredibly smart multi-degree executives sitting there saying, Matt, you got to pump the brakes on this thing because it's not going to work out if we don't solve this, and, bringing you back into reality. You are that team, and it's great to have a wonderful team to run your company, which we do, Medusa does, and it's allowed me the freedom to work on these big projects, but they still need strong leadership in that day-to-day activity. Even if you have strong leadership in place, it's still your company. It's not theirs. That's one of the big lessons I've learned, is just, you got to stay immersed. And I'm hoping to have that change stick with me and not forget about it.
That's well said. There's a guy named Jesse Itzler. I don't know if you know him too well or follow him on his platforms, but he has this saying where he says, "Remember tomorrow," and that to him is basically himself saying that the decisions you make, you're going to remember it tomorrow, and remember tomorrow matters. So you gotta do something today. And I've been playing that through my head a lot today, and it's helped me make a lot better decisions day by day, because I think Matt and I were nodding our head with the whole time you were saying that answer. It's not a specific piece of advice. It's more just being present and kind of like being where your feet are is like your advice to your 2018 self.
Yeah. I mean, it applies to everything. Like you could spend your whole life working your ass off, making as much money as you can so that you can pay for your kids' college. But did you spend any time with your kids to get them there? No. Like you pay for it one way or another. And it's trying to find that happy medium in there. And one of the hardest parts is what you just said. How do you make something a ritual? You read a great book or listen to a motivational speaker who's wildly successful because they live that every day. But you just went to their speech. You just read their book. What are you going to do with that? It's so hard to make it a habit. But we have our habits. We have our ways of making things habits. And I think you just have to pick the right ones,
Yeah. And whether you're a natural with structure and organization, which most entrepreneurs aren't, you're in the creative a lot of the time. You're in the vision planning, the strategy, the key relationships, the relationship building process, and that's not structured organization. Yet that's really what a lot of us need, is to say, oh, I just learned this great thing. I should implement this. Let me go back to my calendar and build in a ritual on paper so I can actually execute it consistently. So we agree with that. In our industry, there's a lot of consolidation. So insurance, there's tons of consolidation. There's a lot of larger acquirers buying smaller. We just joined a larger firm because for 9 years we were growing at a fast clip, but we decided, hey, for us to do something different in the future, we needed to do different things now and partner with different people that have done different things, smarter, have more resources, can kind of come to the table and say, that's not what you should be doing. You should be focusing on this. And some people in our industry look at that as, well, that's awesome. That's something I'm really looking forward to doing in the future. And I think that's really admirable. And some people look at it the opposite and say, man, that you lost some independence, some decision-making, yada, yada. In your space, one of my neighbors I live with in Boston, pretty sure she just sold to Sam Adams Dogfish Head. And pretty huge transaction, right? How do you interpret that? How do you view that? How do you think some of your counterparts view that in general?
There are two completely different mindsets when it comes to having a business and deciding to partner or sell it or dilute it, whatever you want to call it. It all depends on whether or not the ownership group, whether it's one person or 10, whether or not they want that to be the only thing they've done or what stage of life they're in. So when I look at Dogfish Head, Sam Calagione, who built Dogfish Head from a garage, basically, he has put his time in. He's put his work in, and I think he's probably always had a mindset of having someone, I don't know what word you want to use, be a steward of that business or chaperone it into, its next phase, or phase it out. I don't know what his total plans are, but the point is, him and his ownership team made the decision that they would like someone else to take care of the brand. And I don't know what his plans are for the future, but, when I think about you guys, I don't know what your plans are, but if you have partnered with someone who can aid in the process of operating your company, how much time did that just free up for you guys? And when you were a 5-year-old kid, was it your dream to start an insurance agency and retire with it? Or was it to just create things? If you're creators at heart, I'm not saying you're done with G&N, but maybe that was just something that will be left in your legacy as that one thing. And now, so if you're a person who's a creator, back to where we started, that's how some of these sales happen. Wicked Weed, everyone was mad when Wicked Weed sold to Budweiser. I know what Budweiser's thing is. They don't want little breweries taken away from their market share because it dilutes their brand equity, which is worth way more than beer sales. But at the same time, two dudes running Wicked Weed with a couple business partners getting a $38 million offer or whatever it was for a small brewery. they can do anything they want now. They can keep creating and they can live that brand on. I'm not saying you get into this for a payout. That's not what it's about. But sometimes, the business owner has taken something as far as they can with the energy that they have. And it took so much energy just to build it that now it's time for someone else to at least help in the growth of it. And that energy that you once had for it, maybe you focused on something else right now. You understand that, and you understand that there's no escape. So if I'm focused on this thing that I'm building, or maybe you guys are building something else now, you're actually not doing a good service to what you've already created. So maybe it's a great opportunity for everybody. Allows you guys to do something else, allows someone else to expand and bring on a new partner. And then the other side to this, is the competitor and the loyal fan. Influencers, publications, a lot of times they'll look at this stuff and they kind of, it does breed shame on breweries for consolidating or selling out, but there's always a reason.
What you're getting at a lot of it is sometimes your life's work is just somebody else's project. And you kind of have to be a little bit okay with that. That what you obsess over and what you want to do forever, somebody else just might think it's a passion. Like, this is cool to try for a little while. And that guy, those two guys who got a $38 million check, they're like, yeah, my job's complete here. I'm going to move on. Oh, yeah. And that's okay.
I suppose that's a different sort of story, but
that's okay. Like, that's perfectly okay. But the haters of the people who sell are typically those who just have a different way of seeing their passion. They look at it as like, why would I ever sell to Budweiser? They are the enemy. And that's fair.
It is totally, absolutely fair.
Yeah, it's very fair.
Yeah, I like the way you put it. It's like Elon Musk. He has come out a million times saying all the cars and all the boring project, all the different things he does, everything has one goal. He's going to get us to Mars, and then we can take it from there.
I love that. Hey, on that note, who do you think of when you hear the term successful?
I feel like success to me is freedom to do what makes you happy. And I'm still trying to figure out how to get there. And every once in a while, you run into someone who has done what we talked about and, retired early because of it. But you sooner or later find out maybe they're really not all that happy. And so building 5 businesses and selling 3 of them and making millions, that's not always the way out. I've met people that have little to no income who are incredibly happy because they don't have a responsibility. They make just enough to get by, but they're always on ski trips or crazy mountain biking trips, meeting new people around the world. I'm still trying to figure that out because being happy for me is, doing the things that I love to do, one of which is running a business. I do love it. And, but I also love being with my family and traveling. Traveling is certainly something that's difficult now, but even before this, it was difficult to travel just because of everything going on. So trying to find that balance, it's tough. And I feel like I'm getting there. I'm almost there, but.
It'd be nice if there was a machine where, you could just put your fingerprint down. It would create an algorithm and tell you what percentage you should focus on building versus experiencing to be ultimately really happy. Because I know that's kind of what you're detailing out is like to create that freedom that you talked about, you need to build and you need to put a lot of energy into that, a lot of focus, a lot of time and commitment, and you can't experience as much elsewhere. But the experiences are what create memories for you and your family, and they create a lot of joy in the moment. So how do you find that balance, and what percentage is the right percentage? And it's different for everybody, but it'd be nice to be able to just put your finger on it and I'd tell you.
Yeah, I know, man. I do.
In the last 5 years, you've experienced so much change. And we've really talked about habit building. And what kind of habits in the last 5 years have you built that's really kind of helped you deal and juggle? Because I wouldn't say get rid of stress, because I don't think stress is necessarily a bad thing, nor do you. It's just a sign that something's important to you. But what in the last 5 years, what kind of habits are you doing that maybe you could share for some other business owners that's working for you?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones, and again, it's so hard to stick with it, with a business because your business is like your kids. Like you never know when it's going to wake up in the middle of the night crying, right?
Well said.
I guess the older the business gets, the less it's going to happen. I don't know. But one thing that's really helped me, and my wife too, watching her career become more and more demanding and more emotionally taxing, has been just such a solid morning routine. You know, everyone likes to have a daily routine, but I'm not a believer in the daily routine. I think for my life, it doesn't work. It's impossible. Like some days my routine has to deviate to deal with things like a COVID-19 crisis, or like the kids getting called out of school, or something breaking at the brewery, or someone quitting. You know, you never know. But I find that between the early hours of the morning, between that, 5 and 7 a.m. time, and this is just a little piece of my routine, but that is when I have no interruptions. It's when I can sit down and I can enjoy my coffee. And then another part of the routine is I actually write a handwritten list, which I never used to do. I used to always rely on this thing to yell at me, and it just doesn't work. Because I can just hit ignore. But I sit down, I enjoy a really good cup of coffee. And I don't buy stuff online. I don't read the news. I just kind of go through my day. And then when I'm done with my day, I go through my email. And then by the time the kids are up, I've had an hour and a half of just self time to get ready for the day and get ready to tackle it. And I don't have a list of stuff that's impossible to create. I go through it and say, this is a today thing and this is a weekly thing. And I put a T or a W next to it. And my only goal that day is to get rid of the T stuff, because there's going to be other stuff that comes through. And my wife, her routine is, she has a very, very demanding job. She's basically frontline. So she wakes up and she works out hard for like an hour and 20 minutes, and she is physically ready for anything at that point. So that's really helped me a lot. And then the rest of my routine is make breakfast, and then I do my physical activity for the day, because usually I've gotten all my emails and requests and stuff out, and I'm waiting for them to come back to me. But routine breeds success, I really think.